Don't think about it, just play it. There you go.
Mr. Bones is one of those games that truly embodies the saying, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now I've said that about a lot of games, few illustrate it better than this one. On the gameplay front, Mr. Bones is hit or miss. Some interesting ideas, but the execution is spotty. It's a trial and error affair with game over system that can lead to some serious frustration. But its bizarre, oddball nature more than makes up for it. Creativity is dripping from every pore, or in this case, every bone. The way it blends music with gameplay, featuring blues rock that your dad would approve of, is something you don't see often. One that more than makes up for its shortcomings on the gameplay front. It's a wild ride for sure, and unlike Mr. Bones' wild ride from Roller Coaster Tycoon, you won't want to get off of. A short ride and frustrating at times, but it sure is memorable. It's one of those titles that only someone like Sega would put out during this time frame, the Saturn era. A time frame of uncertainty of what did and didn't work in the industry. A case of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Few titles better demonstrate that than Mr. Bones.
How about that? One chord and I wigged him. Now y'all can't talk, but you can listen and maybe even feel.
Before beginning, if you have an interest in checking out the game through emulation, use RetroArch with the Beetle Saturn emulation core. I tried a few standalone Saturn emulators without success, where the game would freeze up after a couple of levels. Thanks to the fellow Boulder Punchers who help support the channel further through Patreon and YouTube memberships. If you'd like to receive early access to videos, be featured in the credits, receive periodic updates, and my undying gratitude, consider joining your fellow Boulder Punchers. Let's get to it. The immortal, diabolical Degulian has discovered a means of animating the dead. His goal is to lay waste and take over the world. Through the power of rhythm, he begins to summon an army of the dead.
Tonight, the world will be mine. In one single night, my army of darkness, of purity, will descend upon the earth. Then there will be no more conflict, no more struggle between good and evil. There will only be evil. The world will be pure as the black void of space. Only in absolute purity can absolute beauty be found. And the only purity there is evil.
But amongst this army of the dead, full of red eyes, walks one with blue eyes. This is our protagonist, Mr. Bones. One pure of heart, or bone.
Didn't I used to have more skin on these bones? Man, you know I got the blues.
Degulian and his army are exactly pleased with us. And so begins Mr. Bones with a chase level.
With something he shouldn't be messing with. Now we're living proof of that. Undead proof anyway.
You are an impurity.
Hey, let's not get personal now.
You will be dissolved.
Uh-oh.
Mr. Bones jumps around with how levels play, both from a literal and figurative standpoint. Some are one-off little minigames. That said, a majority of the short playtime goes with a platforming approach. How your health works isn't like most games I've played. Lower health will also impact the skeletal structure. Take enough damage and bones will begin to fall off. You can recharge your health, or your skeletism meter as the manual calls it, by a few means. You could collect blue power-ups in the environment to replenish your meter. You could also use your plasma beam on enemies to destroy them and replenish your meter. With the plasma beam, it's a real crapshoot with a distance. It never feels consistent if you are in range or not. Even then, enemies like to get a hit or two in while you're doing this, and you can't use your plasma beam without your arms. If you have enough health, bones we've lost will reattach on their own. Else, if your health is too low, you can hit one button rapidly to reattach a nearby bone. Even then, you may not be able to reattach it. There needs to be a certain order of your bones before you could reattach others. And when you reattach your bones on your own with little health, it doesn't take much for them to fall off. One jump is all it takes for these parts to fall off again. This can lead to some frustrating stretches, especially in the early game. The second and third level are enemy heavy. Dodging attacks can be a real trial and error affair. When we die, Mr. Bones has a change in eyes and an obvious change in heart, becoming like the other legions of skeletons we come across. And here is one of Mr. Bones' greatest frustrations, if not its greatest. If you die during a level, you're kicked back to the main menu. One life is all you have, and some of these levels can get quite frustrating, very much a trial and error affair. To the point where I start to use save states with the emulator to make my own checkpoints. Now there's that fine line of giving weight to deaths to punish the player, but not go overboard in frustration. Mr. Bones crosses this line by a wide margin, most notable in the later game stretch. So to those that played this back in the day and had the patience to get through without this option, I commend you. But then you have levels further down the line where this unique health system complements the level. There's one stretch where you need to go through the woods, collecting the pieces you've lost as you progress onward and upward. It's a nice sense of progression to regain your health and your body. As well, you could detach your bones at any point with the press of a button. Send your bones flying in all directions. There's a few endings to levels where you need to have only certain bones attached to end the level, in which case you may need to remove a few parts. Although this can be quite frustrating when you hit the button to remove the bones and have them fly all over the place. Some may tumble over to lower ledges. While that's some interesting ideas, and few levels do give it room to shine, the platforming of Mr. Bones is nothing special. It's once we get past the first few levels where Mr. Bones' calling card begins to emerge, like its music. Getting away from other skeletons, Mr. Bones comes across a cabin, the blind man laying down some tasteful blues licks on a guitar.
What's that sound? Yeah, maybe there's a hotel I could hole up in. Some gingerbread house, bed and breakfast skeleton hotel. I don't know this place, but I know that sound. But how do I know?
Is someone out there? Who are you? What do you want?
Ronnie Montrose composed the game's soundtrack. That's him here as the blind man. He was a notable musician on several fronts. As a session musician, he worked with the likes of Van Morrison, Herbie Hancock, and Sammy Hagar. To note with Sammy Hagar, they were in the same band together for a time, that being Montrose, a band formed in the early 1970s where Sammy Hagar was frontman, before he left to have a successful solo career in joining Van Halen. I haven't heard of Montrose before Mr. Bones. Well, at least I thought. I did look up a few of their songs and did recognize some of these from classic rock stations. Hard rock with a tinge of the blues from the 1970s, the kind your dad would tap his toe to. Speaking of tapping your toe, there's this one track that plays during this log chase level that was stuck in my head for days. This is an amusing level, although judging how far the logs are going to bounce can be a bit inconsistent in how they handle. I guess in his living days, Mr. Bones was quite the skilled musician. He seems to know his way around the fretboard. Those bones of his make for an ideal slide, and for whatever reason, he doesn't need an amp. Leaving this cabin, we have a wave of skeletons in tow. So what's one to do? Well, let's make use of our newfound guitar. This is the amusing little level where you need to string together a series of licks to win over the crowd. A button will have a corresponding lick with it. Bit of a trial and error to find the right order. Watch as those red eyes turn to blue, and out come the lighters. Not only is he skilled with an axe, but Mr. Bones has a strong sense of rhythm. One level has us come across his drum contraption. Dig those rhythms of his. In the game highlight, we have the philosophical platforming level in this void-like space. As we navigate our way through, we could get some tasteful licks full of soul. As well, we'll get some philosophical waxing about the blues. I wish the game had more stretches like this, more profound, and the frustrations are dialed back in the mix.
There's been times when I've just been, just down, like they say, so far I can't see where up is at. You don't know what to do with it. You can't hold on to it inside forever, or you figure it'll bust you apart, and you can't let go of it to anybody because that won't necessarily do any, fix the problem. Sometimes a man's got to cry, but he's been brung up to think, man, he's supposed to cry, he ain't a man or something, so he takes his guitar and he just kind of...
Before playing Mr. Bones, I was aware of this game, but in the back of my mind, I thought that John Petrucci, guitarist of Dream Theater, composed some tracks for the game. I knew he did something for some Sega Saturn game. No, it wasn't Mr. Bones. He did a couple of tracks for a pinball game called Necronomicon, which only came out in Japan. So if you're like me, I'm sure you're wondering, how did Ronnie Montrose get involved with the Mr. Bones project? I looked high and low for information on it, but couldn't find anything. I'm sure there's some old gaming magazine out there with info on it, or even a guitar magazine, but I couldn't find anything through my searches. But during these searches, I did come across an interesting little blurb on TV Tropes. They tried to get David Gilmour from Pink Floyd to do the game's soundtrack. But you know how that is with TV Tropes. No source. How valid is it? So I reached out to the man who came up with the game's story, the concept, and acted as producer. That being Ed Annunziata. Other notable titles Ed worked on around this time include the Echo the Dolphin series. It's unfortunate I had to pay Twitter money to DM him, but it was worth it with the answers that Ed gave. Yes, they did try several times to get David Gilmour involved with the project, but he turned them down. So how did Ronnie Montrose get involved? There was someone at Sega whose brother knew Ronnie. When his brother heard about the requirements they were looking for on the music front of Mr. Bones, he thought of Ronnie. With that, Ed met Ronnie and they immediately hit it off. Ronnie was a skilled slide guitar player, which was what they were looking for. After all, Mr. Bones is made of, well, bones. Bones act as a quality slide device. Not only did Ronnie work on the music, he was involved with the story, the animations, the Easter eggs. The DNA of Mr. Bones is dripping Ronnie Montrose. I mentioned earlier that it was the late Ronnie Montrose who provided the music. In 2012, Ronnie would unfortunately take his own life, but his work lives on through his music. From his session work to his bands like Montrose and Gamma, and of course, Mr. Bones.
Uh-oh, sounds like I'm back in serious jelly.
Are you messing with the Gullion?
The Goulian?
The man with the drums.
Yes, sir, we are messing.
You'd better hang on to that guitar. It might come in handy.
Thanks. Later on.
Beyond the music, one other notable element of Mr. Bones are the cutscenes, memorable with sheer levels of absurdity. While Zono Inc. developed Mr. Bones, it was Angel Studios who did the art and cinematics. Angel Studios is gaming royalty when you look how the company evolved over the years. Formed in the mid-80s, the studio first focused on visual effects for ads, movies, and music videos. In the 90s, they'd branch out to the world of video games, like Mr. Bones here. They were the Mad Lads who ported Resident Evil 2 to the N64. They would go on to make titles like Midtown Madness. Their work caught the eyes of Rockstar Games and the Hauser brothers. They would develop games like Smuggler's Run, with Rockstar producing. In collaboration with Capcom, Angel Studios began work on Red Dead Revolver. Enjoying their partnership, Rockstar acquired Angel Studios in late 2002, rebranding them as Rockstar San Diego. One of the reasons that Rockstar bought Angel Studios was they were fan of the game engine, the Angel Game Engine, or AGE. They had wanted to move away from renderware and have their own engine. And this was a couple of years before EA bought Criterion, the makers of renderware. One of the properties Rockstar would pick up in this acquisition was Red Dead Revolver. Capcom decided to part ways with the project, and Rockstar collected the rights to the IP. The Angel Game Engine would become the Rockstar Advanced Game Engine, so adding an R to AGE, which they still use to this day. I have to wonder how much old code from the Angel Game Engine still exists in its current iteration, even as far back as Mr. Bones days. Rockstar San Diego has quite the history with its contributions to Rockstar as a whole, including lost projects like Agent. But it's incredible to think that some of that Rockstar lineage does exist within Mr. Bones in a strange way. And back to Mr. Bones, their art and cutscenes play a large role in how distinct the game is. I have to commend the work on the animations for playing the guitar. Considering the more primitive technology at the time, you can tell they put a lot of care and detail into the fretboard work while Mr. Bones is playing. The way he uses his bones as a slide, how he bends the strings, there's a lot of love and attention put here. So let's continue on through the rest of the levels. After the philosophical platforming stretch, we have this pretty creative level of collecting the bones as we descend. A bit of a recursive or Inception case going on here of building yourself back up. Or if you screw up, you move a step back, which is okay by me. It's not an instant gamer like so many of the other stretches of the game. You're not kicked back to the main menu after every mistake you make. Moving onward, we come across the Wraith. According to the manual, she's formed an alliance with Dagulian. But through the power of rock, Mr. Bones convinces her to join his side in his fight against Dagulian.
Oh boy, I wish I had my guitar. What can you do on the moon? You can't even breathe on the moon. What can you do in this world? You can't even love in this world. You can't face the darkness, can't face the light. You can't even live in this world. You can't even love in this world. Story, man. I don't even know my own. But I gotta get out of here and stop that man from doing what he's doing. Can you help me?
The trippiness continues with the next level collecting our bones as we make our way down into the void. The best way to describe how this level handles is like Flappy Bird. Descending this vortex, Mr. Bones will spin around on his own. Depending on which direction you push, he'll go faster in that direction, or he'll make a slow transition to moving the other direction. Now it's not quite like Flappy Bird, but it's the easiest way to describe how this level handles. It's one of the game's many cases of the stretch overstaying its welcome. It's frustrating to pick up your pieces, only to take damage and have the said pieces fly back into the void. This Flappy Bird-like feel to the controls continues with the next level. In a different way though. Like the log level earlier, we have an FMV background that we're swimming through. It has the issue of old school controls where they're inverted. Hitting up moves you down, hitting down moves you up. which used to be the standard for controls for some time. This is something I've talked about in the past. Was it around Halo or so that this standard changed? With that, we end up in the Little People's Village.
Do you think he's dead, Bob? Of course he's dead. Look at him. Maybe we should tie him up to be on the safe side, Bob. Tie him up? What for? He's dead. Jim?
Oh, now what? Do I look like a shoe? Get these laces off me.
Oh no. The Ghoulian's walking bones will get no help from us. The Ghoulian is stealing my people. He's using them as slaves in his castle.
Little bitty slaves? Oh, that's too cruel. But I don't walk for the Ghoulian.
He uses arachnids. See?
Kidnapped by spiders? Oh, the weirdness never stops. I can help you. Look at me, sir. Look at my eyes.
You can stop the spiders from stealing my people?
Sure as my name is Mr. Bones. Now, get me out of this.
What?
For the next level, we have to save them from the spiders trying to take them away. This level is a cakewalk compared to what we've gone through and what's to come. Follow the arrow, listen for the cries of the little people, and stop the spiders. Again, it goes on longer than need be, but its absurd nature and great music makes up for it. That's the name of the game for Mr. Bones. Odd and bizarre scenarios that make up for gameplay that's so all over the place and lackluster for large stretches.
Bones, 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 bones. We're carrying a skeleton to an icy lake. We'll carry him so carefully, he's never gonna break. Carrying a skeleton to an icy lake, and his name is Mr. Bones. Bones, bones.
In a game full of frustrating levels, the Ice Lake is a standout. It's a long level with little margin for error. A simple misstep and you're kicked back to the main menu. A level where checkpoints would have done wonders, and with save states I made my own. To those who pushed through this back in the day, I commend your patience. Thing is, I love the idea of the level. I mean, how can you go wrong with ice-based levels? They tend to be the standout levels in games. And I guess this level does stand out from the rest, if for all the wrong reasons. It's not the camera perspective that makes it difficult or the momentum of sliding on ice. It's finding our way forward. We'll need to use these chunks of ice beneath the surface to progress forward. Some we need to break out before they move. Something that's not 100% clear at first. There are some clever uses of moving forward with the ice chunks, like hopping back and forth between these two chunks of ice to keep them moving forward to progress. Thing is, this is pretty far into the level, where a small mishap sends you back to the main menu to try again. Or if you're like me, the checkpoint you made with a save state. Again, there should be weight and consequences to dying, but it can be hard to find that right balance of challenge versus frustration. Mr. Bones isn't even the same zip code when it comes to offering a fair challenge here. Even with save states, it's a level where I was ready to chuck my controller through the wall. And then, oh no, we're not done yet? There's more? Well, at least this level is short, as in a few seconds short. The margin of error is next to zero. Bump into a wall or lose speed and you're dead. Back to the main menu. It's so short that's like, well, what was the point of it? But at least the worst is now over. What follows is a battle with these shadow monsters where the game gets creative in combining 2D and 3D. It's one of those moments where the gameplay gets close to matching the game's creative offerings. What follows is a fight with a giant T-Rex skeleton. Again, it's another case of where the level and gimmick going on longer than it needs to before it ends. We have to free this T-Rex from his restraints in what feels like forever to do so. Its attack patterns don't change, so it becomes a tedious affair in short order. But like most areas of the game, the cutscene more than makes up for it. We now got a friend with this T-Rex, now that his eyes have changed to blue.
Liberty is a sweet thing to savor. I do hope you'll forgive my aggressive and extremely rude behavior. My imprisonment made me somewhat testy, I'm afraid. Now, hop on. And hold on tight.
We're now reaching the end stretch with the Hall of Pain. Man, this level's frustrating. Each time you shatter through the glass, you take a chunk of damage. There's plenty of blue orbs to restore health, so smooth sailing, right? No. With the camera angle and how movements work, it can be tricky to line yourself up in the right spot to collect the orbs to heal up. It took several tries, and once again making my own checkpoints with save states to cut down on the frustration. At least the next level is far more straightforward and enjoyable. I can't for the life of me remember the name of what classic arcade game this level takes inspiration from, so please do leave a comment if you know the name of this arcade game. Before we face the Ghoulian, we have one more final foe that stands in our way. So it's time for a fight to the death, right? Well, not exactly. The name of this level is Funny Bones. What we need to do is get our adoring audience to laugh to make our foe retreat. You have to try out the buttons to see which phrases occur when we hit select button. So you need to get the right order for the joke to land and give the audience a laugh, sending our foe backward. Some of these are quite the groaners that wouldn't be out of place from a dad joke book. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if they did take some of these jokes right from a dad joke book.
Why did the teacher draw a dot on the chalkboard? He wanted to illustrate a point. Now, what do a vacuum cleaner and an electric guitar have in common? Both suck when you plug them in. This horse walks into a bar, and the bartender says, "Hey, why the long face?" What did the Zen master say to the hot dog vendor? "Make me one with everything." Knock, knock. Who's there? Abby. Abby who? Happy birthday to you.
And at long last, the final showdown. It's time to jam once again. For last encounter, it's a bit of a letdown. Block the projectiles with your guitar to send them back. That said, the excellent riffs and licks make up for it. But despite our victory and a brief turn of the eyes, it's not enough to turn to Ghoulian, who refuses to admit defeat. But defeat comes for him as the night ends.
Gotcha.
Oh, now we ain't gonna go through all this again now, are we?
What do you expect to extract? Will you stick a pipette into the heart of darkness? Puppy dog tails?
Excuse me, but didn't you say you had vampire blood?
Shut up! I'll turn you into toothpicks and give you to gluttons who eat nothing but gristle.
Behind you, man!
What's the alternative to evil anyway? Good? Ha!
Excuse me, but the sun?
Show me a good man, and I'll show you a hypocrite. Show me a hypocrite, and I'll show you evil waiting to happen. And I waited long enough. Centuries. The night belongs to me.
The night's over, man.
The long red night has just begun.
I hate to break it to you.
What?
Not
much of a listener, was he?
Mr. Bones heads into the unknown with his Lady Wraith friend in tow. Roll credits as we get some more classic blues rock.
No body, and I have no skin. Ho ho! It could work out. It could happen.
As mentioned earlier, Mr. Bones is a case of game's whole being greater than the sum of its parts. It has some interesting ideas with how platforming works, but the execution is spotty. The one-off minigames for various levels can be hit and miss. The game over system can lead to sheer levels of frustration I haven't felt in some time, where save states became my checkpoints to ease those frustrations. But the sheer creativity, oddball nature, and heart more than make up for it. You could tell developers had a lot of fun putting together this title. Any oddball idea or concept seemed to seep its way in. Its heavy emphasis on heavy blues rock with its gameplay give it a flair you don't see with many other games. It's one of those titles that only some like Sega would put out during this time frame. A time frame of uncertainty of what did and didn't work in the industry. A case of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Wrapping up here, I want to bring up another famous musician, that being the late Frank Zappa. Frank strikes me as someone who would have been a perfect grab for a game's soundtrack. It's unfortunate he passed away in the early 90s. But there's one video of his where he talks about the music industry in the 1960s that's always stuck with me, where Frank gives his thoughts on the decline of the music industry. In the 1960s, there was plenty of bizarre, experimental records released under major labels. These labels weren't run by hip young executives. On the contrary, it was the old cigar chompers running the labels. Ones that had little to no understanding of the music being made, but they said, well, throw it out there and see if it sells.
These were cigar chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives, you know, who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace. The young guys are more conservative and more dangerous to the art form than the old guys with the cigars ever were.
But things began to change when the cigar chompers brought in the hippies. Why did these albums sell well? Let's bring in a hippie to find out. As time goes on, the hippie moves up the ranks and becomes the purveyor of tastes. Unlike the cigar chomper who said, throw it out there and see what happens, the hippie says, well, this won't sell. Kids won't be into it. Believe me, I know. The end result is you end up with a more conservative releases compared to when the cigar chompers were at the helm.
You know, and they got that attitude. And the day you get rid of that attitude and get back to, who knows? Take a chance, you know, that entrepreneurial spirit where even if you don't like or understand what the record is that's coming in the door, the person who is in the executive chair may not be the final arbiter of taste of the entire population.
This has happened across many industries, the game industry included. Now, to be fair, the cost of developing games have gone up at an astronomical level compared to 1996. The rate of technology and breakneck speed with how the industry changed is astonishing. But when you look back at the times like the release of Mr. Bones, you had developers and publishers throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. Well before best practices emerged. Those at the helm without a strong idea of what will sell. Well, put it out in the market and see what happens. As time went on, budgets increased, best practices emerged, and there's a great stagnation of creativity. If it's not like Call of Duty, it's not going to sell. Oh, it needs a multiplayer mode. Single player titles don't sell. It has to be a live service title. Believe us, nothing else sells these days. And then you'll see example after example show these big publishers wrong. You wouldn't see anything like Mr. Bones these days, at least at the large developer level. Budding indie developers, if you're looking for ideas for your game, take a gander at Mr. Bones. There's so much you could take from it. We'll call this mention number 27 for budding developers of games to lift from. I know Sega's in the midst of reviving a bunch of old IPs, Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi. While writing the script, Sega filed some trademarks around Echo the Dolphin. I'm not expecting Mr. Bones to be part of that list. A remaster? That would be swell. It's stuck on the Sega Saturn. Beyond digging up an old copy in a Sega Saturn or emulating, which can be spotty, you don't have other options. And despite its flaws, there's something about Mr. Bones that makes this standout title. From an era full of oddball titles, Mr. Bones stands out amongst those. A short ride and a frustrating one, it's a ride you won't want to get off of. Thanks for watching. Special shout out to my fellow Boulder Punchers for the extra support on Patreon or YouTube memberships. For those in the thank you for your patronage tier, American Boot and Tom Terrible. For those in the now this is Boulder Punching tier, Ethan, the Madman in Waco. If you'd like to further support the channel, consider joining your fellow Boulder Punchers through Patreon or YouTube membership. I've got earlier access to videos, be featured in the credits, receive periodic newsletter updates, and of course, my undying gratitude. Oh, and I guess before I wrap up here, I probably should have mentioned it earlier. You can probably tell I've been a bit under the weather. I've had some health issues the last few weeks. That's why it's been a bit since I've done my last video. And even now, you could tell I'm definitely not still 100%, but it was time to get the video out here. Thanks again.
You know, it's not a matter of not having the blues or not knowing. It's a matter of not recognizing, what it is. It's just like we think that, just because somebody's got $10 million, they're happy.